Hello and welcome to ALEC's 50th annual meeting here in the great state of Florida. I'm joined right now by State Representative Jordan Ulery of the great state of New Hampshire. Now, look, New Hampshire, what's the New Hampshire motto?
Live free or die.
Now, that is one heck of an overall motto. As you're lining up and try to give it, what the mottos are going to be, I'd have to guess that New Hampshire had to have been at the front of the line.
It depends on where you were, but yeah, there was the Battle of Bennington, which laid the groundwork for the Battle of Saratoga, which got the French to come on to the revolutionary side. And if you go to the Civil War, Gettysburg, everyone talks about the movie Gettysburg, and they talk about Maine, second Maine up in Little Round Top, Big Round Top, that area, and that heroic charge. Perfectly fine. But the next day in Pickett's charge, it was New Hampshire cannon that held the line.
There you go.
And then New Hampshire infantry led the repulse attack after Pickett's charge was broken.
See, that part I was all very well aware of Maine's contribution up there in Big and Little Round Top, but I did not know that it was the New Hampshirites or the New Hampshireans.
Granite Staters.
The Granite Staters were the ones who held back Pickett's charge. Okay, so how long have you been representing the great state?
Since about 2004.
2004. And what are some of the bigger changes that you've seen over that time?
Over the last several years, the New Hampshire House I'm in the House, so I'm more familiar with it, but the government has seen an influx of individuals coming from other states with progressive ideas that are antithesis to what longtime residents of New Hampshire espouse. Things that are just, what pronouns? Why? I hear this when I go to the coffee shop. Regardless of where I go to the coffee shop, I hear this. I'm also in the Knights of Columbus, so I have contacts throughout the state. And I hear it across the state. What is happening? Where's the common sense? Where's the role of New Hampshire? Where's the role of the United States? We're supposed to be a federal government, not a national government.
All right.
That's a bit of a problem.
Well, that's one of the things that we've seen overall in the past, not just since you've been serving, but I'd say most of my life, a mere 50-some years, that there is more of a push towards a federal government and a federal oversight instead of the standard way of how the Constitution was written with the focused on the states' rights and federalism.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't understand. They understand the three branches of government in many ways. You've got the executive branch, you've got the legislative branch, you've got the judiciary. But the government is actually a three-legged stool. A three-legged stool consists of, firstly, the people who elect their state government. Then you have the several, and here's the key word, sovereign states, and that's used in law. It's several sovereign states. That's the second leg. And the third leg is the federal government. And the federal government should always be done with a small f because it's supposed to be the least responsive. You read our Constitution, the federal government is supposed to do only that which is specifically stated in the Constitution. Not, it's for the good of the people. No. The good and welfare, or as some people call it, the good and plenty clause, is for the good of all, not for the good of this class or that class or some other class. It's not for the good of business versus the good of the worker. It's not for the good of the worker versus the good of the business. It's for the good of all, and it's for the common defense. Those are the primary functions of the federal government. The Smidley everyday things as to what corner a stop sign gets put on, that's for local government or state government.
Hey, there was a very popular radio host, won't say who overall, but he basically boiled it down. When it came down to federal responsibilities, I want you to make sure the borders are secure and there's no worms in my food. Other than that, just leave me alone. We'll leave the rest to the states. So as we've had this, because if you look at it overall, I mean, it's been a general creep that we've been seeing probably for well over a century. I mean, when you go back to all the way to Teddy Roosevelt wouldn't have done it, but Wilson probably. That's when it started to see more and more of the federal government try to take a hand in the everyday life.
Well, there's a popular commentator, media commentator, who calls Wilson the worst president we've ever had, and he's got a bit of history background on that. And yeah, probably
he's up there.
I mean, he segregated the military after it was in the process of being desegregated.
Right.
He instituted or supported the Jim Crow laws in the South. He hired a whole bunch of servants for the White House and got us involved in foreign entanglements that Washington specifically suggested we not get involved in. There may or may not have been reason to get involved in World War I. There certainly was outrage over the sinking of the Lusitania, but the Lusitania, as we now have proof, was actually carrying contraband. And the Germans warned that specific ship was going to be sunk. But yellow journalism got us involved in the Spanish-American War.
Well, when you look at the journalism itself, you have just about every single war. I mean, the Vietnam War, what was reported and why we started there wasn't quite all that accurate. The first war in Iraq, what they reported wasn't quite all that accurate. And so it's a standard theme that keeps playing over and over again. And it's a little disappointing, disheartening, and maybe even a little frightening that as I get older to see it happen over and over again and see everybody just keep jumping in hook, line, and sinker each and every time. But as they go through and as the federal government, because they have been, when you look at it, they're just taking a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And so we can't count on the federal government to stop themselves.
Well, we had a president that talked about that. I'm from the most terrifying words in the English language. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. Besides being a trite phrase, have a ring of truth in them. Because government can't solve every problem. Government on any level can't solve any problem. They can provide pathways that work. They can provide frameworks. They can provide restrictions on themselves if they're willing to do that, to prevent them from interfering. Property rights is an issue for people. I don't want a building to go up in my backyard because I want to take my dog and for a walk in the woods that I don't own. Okay? Okay? And that's an issue. That's an issue. But it's all an example of exactly what you were talking about. That is an overreach of government trying to control. The government shouldn't control. It should guide. It should limit itself. It should limit the actions of a bad person or punish a person. I often have people at the coffee shop come and say, there ought to be a law. I ask them, what does the law do? It prevents how? No law prevents anything. It punishes violation of the law. It doesn't prevent anything.
So you're saying overall that perhaps the federal government should be more of a facilitator than somewhat of a restrictor?
Absolutely. Rather than trying to control everything, like some Politburo directive or a 5-year or 10-year plan that always fails, it should be a facilitator. That's a good phrase. I like that phrase.
Facilitator instead of a restrictor. So then what do the states actually have to do in order to pull back some of that power?
Well, they're going to take action. If you read the Constitution again, the 10th Amendment reserves the powers not specifically defined in the Constitution to the states and the people therein. The courts, the judiciary, the Supreme Court, has kind of not paid attention to the wording of that amendment. New Hampshire has similar language in its original Constitution, saying that we have to follow what's in the Constitution.
Right.
And as you know, the New Hampshire Constitution is the precedent to the U.S. Constitution. In addition, one of the key elements that was put in the U.S. Constitution, matter of fact, it's Article 5, is allowing the Constitution to be modified. And there's two ways in which the Constitution can be modified, and they're both equally valid. One has been used frequently. The other one has been threatened a couple of times, but never really been used. The one way we're all familiar with, Congress comes up with some lame-brain idea to restrict the sale of alcoholic beverages because I forget her name, was going out with an axe and splitting open beer barrels. Okay, they passed that, and then they had to pass another one. That was done by impetus of Congress to restrict the sale of alcoholic beverages nationwide.
Right.
I'm not sure how they had that authority. They could restrict the transport in between states,
Right.
but within a state, I really don't understand why.
If I'm making whiskey at my home in Virginia, I can drink it in my home in Virginia, and there's
Right.
really nothing the federal government should be able to do about it.
Well, it'd be more like Harlan County, Kentucky, and you get your
Well, if I want the good whiskey.
in a mason jar on your back porch every morning. But that's another story. And as a result of that, there was a hue and cry within the several states. There was an increase of crime. You had the crime families in New York and in Chicago, particularly in Chicago, and you had that in the whole Al Capone and all that stuff. And what happened is the individual states started pushing for a change in the law to repeal the Olmstead Act. Okay? The states started to push that. Well, Congress came close to losing control of the situation, so they put their own repeal in, and then it gave the power back. If you read the Repeal Act, turns the authority of regulating alcoholic sales to the states, where it belonged in the first place. So now you've got if your store is a package store, you have a package store. If your state's like New Hampshire, which is a state liquor store, then you have your state-run liquor store. And we make money, thank you very much. Don't drink and drive. Next exit, state liquor store.
But that was the one part that was used more. What hasn't been used? And what are we trying to do today?
Today, there's an Article 5 convention, because the first part is the Congress. The second part is if you have enough states with a substantially similar petition to Congress to call a convention of the states. Now, it's not a convention of the states, as a lot of people talk about words, but it's a convention of the states. And the states then run the convention. The states then come up with a petition. The rules for this have already been proposed back 9 years ago in Arizona, when there was a convention of states that came up with a set of rules for mandating a convention of the states, as to how it's going to operate, how many votes each state would have, who would be delegates. Leave it up to the states to either appoint or elect delegates to go to this convention and respond. Some states, like Indiana and others, have passed a truthful delegate or a honest delegate restriction, so that if they don't follow the rules, then they get recalled and you get to do it over again. But out of that convention would come a proposal to go to the people. It's not
Sort of a nationwide ballot measure?
Yeah, they're not going to change the Constitution.
Right.
They're going to propose a change to the Constitution. And then whether the states do it by legislature or by popular vote, then the various states would pass or not pass. And when 3/5 of the state pass it, it would become part of the Constitution and then become law of the land. So, there's a lot of concern about, well, you do away with the Second Amendment. 13 states would be needed not to vote for it. And
I think we have that covered.
Yeah, I think anyone can name those 13 states.
So how close are we to having a constitutional convention? A state?
That is a question that needs to be rediscussed. 1979, enough states had put in petitions to require Congress to call a convention. For some reason or another, the archivists didn't bother to count them.
Wow.
And
wow.
I have some information that particular issue may be before the United States Supreme Court within a short period of time. It's called a writ of mandamus. They've been working on it for several years.
Wow. Well, that sounds very, very interesting and awfully excited when you see the power, as you said, possibly return back to the people. Take a little bit more from Washington, D.C. Lord knows they have enough right now as it is.
That's the idea. That is the idea.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you coming with us today. This is Representative Jordan Ulery of the great state of New Hampshire. Here we are live at the ALEC annual meeting in Orlando.
Thank you.